I think we finally almost perfected the perfect barbarian in Path of Exile 2. This barbarian not only one-clicks the entire screen, that is a total upgrade from the last build that we did, does even more damage to bosses. I've run through every pinnacle boss up until this point with no issue, and lets you even clear Simulcrum, the hardest content in the game, as well as map for crazy amounts of loot at insane speeds. And I would argue to say this might just be the fastest barbarian build in the entire game. Now, before we get into everything, I'm going to make it super easy for you to understand this build. This build works primarily off of 3 individual things: huge AoE clears and insane attack speeds. So your AoE clearing abilities and your huge damage abilities for pinnacle bosses can get off super quick. And our attack time with our perfect strike is only 1 second. Not to mention our almost 40% movement speed, yes, on a warrior. Now really quick, if you look up here, we're going to take a look at all of the gear that I currently have, and I'll just go over it really quickly so you can see it all on the same screen. You can see we're going to be using Grand Regalia here. This gives us a little less armor than we currently had with the full armor regular chest plate, but we can convert our evasion rating to armor with some of our skills that I'll show you, so it almost evens out. But the big bonus here is we get our bonuses for elemental resistances and spirit, or if you choose to take maximum life over elemental resistances, and you get that per socketed rune or soul core. This is a big bonus to the build because it allows us to get more spirit, which we need to be able to put more spirit skills in our setup to make us more powerful. And again, elemental resistances to help max those out, or max life if you've already got that max on other gear. We're also using the Thrill Steel helmet. This helmet, while it doesn't seem that spectacular, gives us onslaught, and onslaught, you can see here, gives us 20% increased skill speed and increased movement speed, meaning we're attacking way faster and we're moving a lot faster with a free 10% movement speed. You can't pass that up on warrior. Also, another unique we're using is Zoph's blood. This is going to give us maximum life and fire resistance, but this gives enemies in our presence fire exposure, which means we automatically penetrate 20% of an enemy's fire resistance. We're also using ingenuity, so that way we get bonuses gained obviously from our rings. And you want to try to stack your rings with max life, strength, resistances as you need them, and then a ton of damage. So you can see I have a ton of flat damage stats. Don't go for percentage, go for flat damage stats here, like fire and lightning. You can see over here we have fire and lightning again. That all adds on to our DPS pretty drastically. Now for our weapons, you want a couple main things. Now for our weapons, obviously you want the most DPS on your weapon first, that being increased physical damage percent and extra things like lightning, fire damage. You also want a large amount of elemental damage with attacks. And you can see our Maul has a ton, 128%. Where our Cultist Great Hammer only has 34%, but we make up for it because the other things that you want are increased attack speed, they're a must, and +6 or +7 to level of all melee skills, which is drastically gonna upgrade your damage because all of your skills are essentially melee skills, meaning they go from level 19 or 20 all the way up to 32 if you have 2 weapons. And again, our boots, we're just going to take as much resistance as we can get. Strength, max life, and max movement speed, obviously. And our gloves, make sure you have attack speed, the most armor, and the most strength that you can get. Or if you can find one, you can take +2 to melee skills. It's going to make your DPS even beefier. With the maces and everything included, I think I probably spent around 15 to 20 divine for this build. Your clear speed is off the charts. For a barbarian, you can practically one-hit everything in maps, as well as handle the pinnacle bosses with not much worry. Now, obviously, you want as much max life as possible. I currently only have like 4,300 and 190 energy shield with this particular setup. I lose some life swapping to the setup, but it's fine because I clear much quicker. But you obviously want to stack your life to try and get around 5 to 6k, and then you should be running through everything completely easily. Also, obviously max out your resistances. You can see I'm still working out some of the build here, so I just gotta add a couple more chaos points. But we ended up taking away some of our max resistances because we really don't need them in this setup. Now, the skills you want to make this setup work are as follows. Your Mace Strike, it's going to be one of your primary damage dealers that you can clear with one click. With this setup, it's even more powerful than the previous Molten Titan setup. You can see we currently have 118,000 DPS with this, and this build really works with the Expert Cultist Great Hammer. It makes the build so much better because of the extra splash explosion damage that you get from this weapon. And as you can see, we're able to just one-click clear every enemy on the screen basically every time we walk into a pack, making clearing super fast. Now, the things we want here are Heft, Fire Infusion, Magnified Effect that gives us more area effect, as well as Martial Tempo so we can attack quicker, and Elemental Focus. Those are all going to give you a little bit more attack speed and more damage for your Mace Strike. This build also comes with this combo as well that you can throw into the setup. We want Leap Slam here. We want it with Holy Descent, Stomping Ground, Despoiler, and Aftershocks. We're going to use this to leap into packs. Generally, we'll stun a couple enemies this way, and then we can Bone Shatter them. Yes, we're bringing Bone Shatter back because it's extra OP with this setup. And a couple of the big things we have here is Devastate, so you fully break armor when inflicting a heavy stun with this skill. You also get Behead, so you get an additional modifier. When you kill a rare enemy with Bone Shatter, Armor Explosion, so we break other people's armor around us, and then explode the entire screen again, sort of like Mace Strike. And then Impact Shockwave, so when you heavy stun an enemy, the skill creates an aftershock, which is extra explosions on top of one another. It's kind of insane. And again, you can run the same kind of combo, but before going into Bone Shatter, you can use Armor Breaker. The big thing is we're going to break extra armor here with Splinter. Upon breaking the armor, we'll apply Daze to them. The cool thing about Daze is when we hit them and apply Daze, this means they take 50% more stun buildup, allowing us to stun bosses and pinnacle bosses, for example, much faster. Also with Ruthless here and then Demolisher, so that way these supported skills break 40% more armor. So essentially being able to break their full armor and daze them as well, we're going to be able to fully stun them and almost stun lock them super easy with this setup, especially even the pinnacle boss. And then obviously Perfect Strike, our main damage dealer with concentrated effect, close combat, window of opportunity, fire penetration, and primal armament as our main boss killer or pinnacle boss killer. We're also leveraging Infernal Cry, so we get increased rage and increased power and increased empowered attacks, meaning our Perfect Strike will hit much heavier, and Shockwave Totem, so that way we essentially set down an area, especially in pinnacle boss fights, where we're essentially getting free healing automatically and getting free rage generation to give us more DPS for our Perfect Strike hits. And this is where you really want the Grand Regalia chest piece, so you can get that extra plus 10 to spirit. You need plus 10 on it at least. That way you can get an extra 40% spirit. You can set up 3 of these spirit skills, as well as the support gems that go in them. You want to have at least 140 spirit for this setup. Now we want to take Berserk, so that way we get the increased rage effect, increased DPS, and we regen life for free with Vitality. Herald of Ash is going to help us deal extra explosions across the screen. It's going to help drastically with our AoE. We want Fire Mastery here, Persistence, and Herbalisms, and Scavenged Plating. This is a big one. And this is a big one because when you fully upgrade it, you get more armor per Scavenged Plating. Now the big gripe with this build you're going to notice, or you've just seen this on my screen, is we only have 70% armor. This jumps up even into like the mid 80% range with Scavenged Plating. And that's important because fully breaking an enemy's armor grants you stacks of Scavenged Plating. And this is where our Armor Breaker comes in, because you can armor break hit an enemy, break off all their armor fully, and if you do this especially in a pack, you get your max 10 stacks of Scavenged Plating. You get a bunch of increased armor, so that way you're even more tankier without having to waste the passive points to spec into armor. Now really quick, I do just want to go over the skill tree here, and I'll show you really quickly here just at a glance. You can change a couple things depending on what your needs are, but I'm going to go over the basic idea of it very quickly. So we're going to take these life regen nodes here. It's just going to help our overall life regen. We get increased armor and stuff, as well as damage and increased area of effect here. Now pay attention here. The red is my first weapon set for AoE clearing, and my green up here is going to be for the pinnacle boss setup. In the other hand, again, I switch one of my weapons over there for more DPS when I'm ready to fight a pinnacle boss. But this setup is more for single target damage in the green, and the red is more for AoE clear. So again, for the AoE, obviously we take more area of effect, and in general, we path over here to take more damage. Now you want to make sure you take all the empowered attack and Warcry nodes there for the Perfect Strike setup, as well as some of the aftershock and area effect stuff here for your AoE. You need strength for your Giant's Blood, and until you get a lot of it, you really need to be running this stuff. And again, we take more area of effect over here in the red. Some of our resistance stuff over here is important. These particular nodes right here help us get rage, which is another big benefit because we're getting rage very quickly when we're getting hit by an enemy, allowing us to max it out, allowing us to max out our DPS. Now, some of the main things to keep in mind here that I have on the setup, but that are overall for the entire build, are these armor nodes here. So you can see this armor node, 30% increased armor if you have been hit recently. You also get 30% armor if you've been hit recently right here. And that right there gives you 60% armor once you get hit once, which is again is going to help us to max out our armor. Now, obviously we want our avatar fire, so we're converting all our damage to fire in this setup. Again, empowered attack nodes here and more for our single target damage over here. And then Giant Split, so we can dual wield two-handed weapons, obviously for more DPS. Now here's two little notes. You want to try and invest in an Against the Darkness Time Lost Diamond here. You want some sort of resistance as a maximum extra resistance, and you want increased life. You can see +1, +1, +1% increased life. All these small nodes are giving us increased life, and we get like +3 or 4 to maximum cold resistance. And once we pat down here, you want to take these all attribute nodes, so that way you can up your attributes, so that way you can get at least 51 in each dexterity intelligence, because the Grand Regalia chest piece actually requires 51 of each attribute. If you notice, I've done it too. It's perfectly okay to put intelligence or dexterity skill in some of these attribute nodes. if you need them to actually meet that requirement. So we're taking all those extra attribute nodes as well as this 10% increased attributes as well. And you can also take these reduced attribute requirement nodes so that way you can meet your strength requirement for your weapon if you're having trouble doing that with high level weapons. And then finally, we're taking the attack speed buffs over here. And you can see once we swap weapons to our second setup, ideally you can swap your fire infusion gem or your fire penetration gem. If the boss you're fighting, you don't need the extra fire penetration. And you can see your DPS actually goes up here to 40,000 with perfect strike, meaning you're going to hit about 4 to 5 million on a solid hit that's buffed by your totem and everything else. But you can keep the fire penetration resistance if you're fighting a boss that you still need extra fire penetration on. You can also take fire penetration in some of your gems that will also help you. And for your gems, you can take things like increased attack speed, increased elemental damage, and increased overall attack damage as well. Any one of those three is going to give you pretty big buffs to your DPS, as well as taking increased armor percentage. I think I have a bunch of increased armor here on some of my gems, just so that way I can help meet that cap a little bit quicker, since we're not taking as much armor in this setup. Again, that guide will have the full rotation and every single thing in it, so make sure you check that out and save it. Now I want to show you really quick a tier 15 with corrupted and irradiated on it, so that way the monster levels are 81. How easy it is to just clear the screen of these guys. Even though we got the worst map in existence, you can see even just our leap slam clears every single enemy. And ideally, even with just our mace strike, we can clear the entire screen as well as rare enemies in basically a single hit. They all explode on top of each other. And you can see even our leap slam has increased attack speed, so we can leap much quicker, completely destroy enemies in one hit. Now again, one of the other combinations we can work with here are specifically leap slam using our armor break into our bone shatter. But for clearing's sake, sometimes you don't even need, once you've upgraded enough, you don't even need your armor breaker at all. You can just leap slam into a pack and then bone shatter because everyone's stunned, and again kill everyone in one hit. And then you can get super speed, do the same thing, leap throughout the map, and then choose, depending on the scenario, whether or not you want to mace strike or bone shatter enemies. If they all die, obviously no need to bone shatter them. If you see the glowing orb above one of their heads, you can just mace strike them, or you can just bone shatter all of them again into existence. Either way you want to do it, your fast and your clear speed is insane every single time. That being said, if this helped you out, drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.